All right.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, welcome. We are back with another expert episode of Successful Women Spill the Tea, where myself, Alexis, and Mehreen, we are certified high performance coaches. And, it's our mission and kind of goal in life to help lift other women up. And we started this podcast because we want to be able to share our stories, be able to amplify other female voices, and be able to learn from each other from our journey and everything that we've learned along the way. So we have an amazing guest today. Mehreen, did you want to introduce our guest?
Yeah, let's do that. So Jennifer Fontanilla, we're so excited to have you here today and talking about rewriting your money story. And so a little bit about Jen. I'm going to look at my notes to make sure I get all this right, because there's a lot. I want you guys to hear this. This is how powerful she is. She likes to bring easy humor style with her clients to really help them work through their financial overwhelm and confusion so that they have clarity and peace of mind around their money. I'm sorry, I stumbled around my words. Basically, she's fun, she's outgoing, she's going to get you, if you're feeling confused, overwhelmed, burnt out, I don't know what to do with my money, she will help you have clarity. And one of the things that she really values is the process and methodology that applies to the innovative research that in the fields of neuroscience, neuroeconomics, and behavioral science that helps clients identify and change their money patterns and behaviors. I'm excited about this one. So she's committed to taking women and empowering them to control their finances so that they can gain clarity, hope, and confidence and live out their true passion and purpose. So welcome, Jen. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you, ladies. I am super excited to be here as well.
Great. So one of the questions that we get from our clients is, what is rewriting your money story, and why is it important for us to know it?
Yes, so important. And so sometimes, these words, especially in the field of finance and money and all these different things, first, I always think it's so funny that everything in the financial world has to have an acronym, and then there's like 3 meanings for one thing. And it's so just know that if you feel confused and overwhelmed, everybody feels that way. So even in my field, when I was a financial advisor, I would just think oh my gosh, there's just too many things to remember. And so just know and be at ease that this is not always just straightforward. And so there's always learning in the field of money. And so when we talk about our money story, we're referring to, the money mindset. What is it that you think when it comes to money? It's the sum total of your beliefs, your feelings, your reactions around money. Is it positive? Is it negative? And all of those things are habitual. They're also a result of the subconscious, unconscious patterns and behaviors that we have around money. It's things that we don't even think about. So, you probably don't even know that you have them sometimes, and so it's those things that have been rooted into us as a child when it comes to money. And so the stories can be, positive, negative. What did we inherit from our parents, our mom, our dad, or whoever raised you? And so that experience creates a story, and that story is what forms and shapes your relationship with money. And depending on what that story is how you're going to react and make financial decisions in your present day life.
So give me an example of what is it that they struggle with? What kind of money story? Can you give me an example of what can have an effect?
Yes. So I had a client a few months ago, and we were working through his relationship with money because he's now 45. But he always had this strange relationship where if he got a lot of it, he would spend a lot of it. But then sometimes when he had it, he would hoard it. He would even be afraid to pay a bill, even though he had the money. It was just I don't want to let it go. So he had this weird dynamic. And then he'd go to a thrift shop, and then he'd buy tons of stuff because he loves thrift shopping and all that kind of thing. And so it was just manifesting in a way where the bills were not getting paid on time. There was so many inconsistencies. So that was what he was dealing with. And he was very tired of I don't know what's happening. Why am I going through this? So what happened was we we sat down and we explored the money story. So what that looked like was what I had the client do is list out everything from the earliest moment you can remember your interaction with money. It could be as simple as, I remember my mom gave me 50 cents and we went to the candy store and she told me I could pick out anything I wanted and I bought a piece of gum. And I remember I hung on to it and I ate it later on that afternoon. It could be something that's simple. And so what happens is you start to record all these different events that you can remember, anything insignificant or significant. And so what happens is we take a look at certain things like, oh, this keeps showing up, or you even see the patterns that the parents exhibit. Oh, the dad keeps, there's a guilt trip that dad keeps putting on you, or mom keeps emphasizing that you have to go to school because she didn't go to school and she valued education because she didn't have it. So you can see how that can be placed on you as a child. So those are different things that you start to look at when we're working together, and we start to identify these patterns throughout your history and your entire money history bio story. So going back to this client, he remembered when he was 9, him and his father were riding in the car, and he goes, "Daddy, I want McDonald's. Can I get McDonald's?" And the dad just turned around looked at him from in the back seat, and he says, "Do you have money for that?" And as a child, he remembered, he shrunk back. He just felt guilty and he didn't want to ask for anything anymore. And it's things like that where he realized later on, after we uncovered these things, this is an example where he realized that's where a lot of the guilt came from. A lot of guilt was placed in that moment from the father saying it to him like that, like, "Do you have money for that?" Of course, he's 9, he's not working. And so he started to feel feelings of guilt. So he would feel like, "Oh, I don't deserve this. I can't buy that. I don't deserve to have something nice. I can't ask for help if it's offered to me in a financial way." And so as you can see, something like that happening at 9 years old can affect somebody growing up into adulthood. And so until you build awareness, you don't realize like that's where it came from. And there's so many different examples, but that's an example of how money stories from your past or your childhood most likely are coming up later on in life, and how they affect how you handle money or how you have a relationship with money.
Yeah. What was just coming to me when you said that, I think I've said that to my daughter. Do you have money for that? Because I've got one daughter, and I'm just curious what you would say about this, but I've got one daughter who she can't keep money in her account. Like, she gets it, she's going to go buy makeup, she's going to do, And then I have another one who doesn't spend as much, and she actually is like, "No, I don't want you to get that. It's going to cost you too much." So it's like two different extremes. They're living in the same household. So what would you advise parents who, are dealing with like teenagers who are learning to, earn their own money and manage their own money, their own account? And now we don't have like that registered checkbook like we used to when I had an account when I was 15, 16. And so it's there's not this concept of, like actually feeling it. It's very electronic, right? It's all digital. So how do you train your kids around that?
This is such a great question. I actually get it every once in a while because I'm mostly talking to adults, but then they start to realize, just like how it triggered you, you're like, "Wait a minute, and the same thing happened to me. How is this like, oh my God, am I messing up my kid? I have a 9-year-old boy. So I started thinking, oh my gosh, like, what am I saying? Am I screwing him up? Like, what if he becomes my client like later on because of what I did to him? And so I totally get this. And it's so great that you are, asking, well, what can we do as parents? I think there's a lot of different things, and depending on what age the child is at, there's going to be different things that you can do. But I think where it needs to start is, as parents, we have to remember we are our children's role model. They emulate what we do. So we have to be very aware that we're not being hypocritical. So if we're telling them, "Hey, you better save," "Hey, you better do this," are we doing that? Are we modeling that for them? Because, kids are resilient. Kids are very smart. So there's going to be this other kind of issue to deal with. That they're like, "I don't know why she's telling me to do all this if she's not even doing it herself." So I think that's the first thing we need to pay attention to, is if we are being that example, are we being, doing, having what we're telling them to do. So I think that's important to realize first and foremost. If we are telling our kids to do a certain thing, are we practicing it? Are they seeing our actions following what they are saying? Because we can say all day long, right? That whole, do as I say, not as I do. No, that doesn't work, because it's just like, okay, whatever. So I think that's so important to remember that we need to be that example of what we are trying to teach our children to be. And then I think also when the children are very young, and you made such a great point, Mehreen, about it's a digital world. This is what's dangerous, because I remember when my son was 3 and he'd be in the cart and I'd be at, let's say, Target. I remember learning about children don't see that physical exchange of, I'm giving this money and we're going to walk out with the stuff in the cart. It's not like we just put whatever we want in the cart and we just get it and we just walk out, because that's what ends up happening. They see that this credit card or the debit card is almost like a magic wand. Ooh, Mom swipes it and we walk away, right? It doesn't work like that. And it was the strangest thing. So I remember specifically making sure that I even gave him the money, and I would explain to him, even at a very young age, I said, okay, this money, okay, how did I get the money? He goes, you worked for it. I'm like, okay, now I need you to hand it over to the lady, because what does that do? He goes, oh, we can get the stuff that we put in the cart. So, you kind of have to walk them through that so they understand, how do all these pieces work? And this is the part that was so strange, because later on, you start to think about, how can I integrate these little moments in my relationship with my child? How can we integrate these little lessons? And it's simple. Think about, you have to really think about, how can I explain this on a very, very simple level? And sometimes people, well, when is it a good time to talk about these things? Like, bring it down to their level. We're not trying to explain, mutual funds to a 3-year-old. I mean, you can, but, baby steps. And I think showing them the physical exchange of dollars for goods or services is a good start. And then later on, when he became, 6, 7, now we're moving on to the iPad and buying video games. And so this was the weird one. I thought this was so strange, because this actually stumped me. So he said, okay, can I give you $5 so I can buy these things in this video game? It was like a virtual store where he could buy things. But you literally had to have your card attached to the account that's attached to your your iPad and account, all that stuff. Right. And so he's like, can you put the money in the iPad? And I'm like, oh, it doesn't work like that. He's like, well, then how do I buy it? He said, I have to go to the bank. So I literally took him to the bank with me. I go, okay, see this dollar, this $5, we're putting it into the ATM. And then that's so weird, because I had to explain, this card is attached to an account, and then the bank manages this money. And you realize at that moment, as adults, it's just like, whatever, we just do this all day. It's so easy. But when you have to explain this to a child, you start to realize, like, you are dealing with a million intangibles. How do you explain this? Like, there's a bank, there's this money in there's this card, and then there's this credit card and these numbers. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can see how it can be confusing for us as parents. But break it down very, very simply. Explain to them on a very, very simple level, like, what is happening at every transaction, what's happening at that level, so that the kids understand, like, even down to, like, this money came from me working. Where do you think I go every day? Or why do you think I'm sitting at the computer? What do you think I'm doing? So they have an attachment to, this money came from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And, I think, and then going back to your daughters, I think, you being aware of it already is already an amazing start. I think the most important thing for you is that, and I know you're responsible, because we had this conversation about the money thing, with how you want to handle your finances. I think that if you just, and they are in different places, right? I actually side more with your daughter, who, no, it's okay. I was, when you said that, it totally reminded me of my relationship with my own mom, because she would try to give me money and I'd be like, no, it's okay. That's expensive. Don't get it. I'm so like your other daughter. But I think if you just teach them in their own respect and how they're approaching it, as long as they have a healthy relationship, they understand, like, even like the other daughter that is saying, no, don't buy those things. Maybe with her, it'd be a lesson of, like, you are deserving of it. It's okay to want things. It's okay to buy nice things. things, because, you know, you can have the opposite where we don't want to develop a negative relationship where, oh, you know, rich people are greedy, or, you know, why do you have to buy that name brand? Like, if you want that and that brings you joy, that's okay. You know, obviously within parameters, if it's going to blow your budget, that's a different story. But it's just we're talking about building that healthy relationship where you're saying, it's okay, I deserve it. I worked for this. You know, this brings me joy. If I want to have a $7 latte, I'm going to drink the $7 latte. I'm not going to completely give up that coffee. So I think it's important for us to also not say these things in front of our children about, like, you know, we hear a lot of times about like stripping everything in our life down to like nothingness, right? And I don't believe in teaching people that. I side more on the, hey, how can we bring more income? How can we increase the cash flow? Yes, we can trim down on the expenses, but I don't believe in like making somebody not live a joyful life, where if you feel you want to enjoy that because that thing brings you joy, it's okay. Now, with your other daughter, I would say, you know, understanding, you know, the responsibilities of, okay, this is great. If you like buying these things, okay, awesome. But how about the other side of it? Are you saving for, you know, charity? Are you saving for your future? Are you doing all the other responsibilities that come with the money? Because you can have both. Because I really, truly believe that if we have this balance and understand that we're covering all bases and that we have this healthy relationship with the money, I think we can have it all. But, you know, within reason and within time, it's not, you can, I believe you can have it all. It's just not always all right now.
Right. Yeah, it's, you know, I think that our money story is something that, you're right, a lot of people don't think about, and how much it impacts not just how you spend your money, but just even how you believe you can make money, and, you know, and believing that you deserve that money. I know I've heard so many times from, especially I find like entrepreneurs or business owners, where they get into this kind of sort of this routine of almost feeling like they shouldn't charge for, say, services as much. Or I've struggled with it myself, I'll be completely honest, where you want to help somebody and then, you know, somebody doesn't have the money. So then you automatically scale back your fee. And I know that is somewhere in my money story that I'm still working on to sort of be more comfortable with it. And I think it's different too on an intellectual level, what we know we should do, we know our worth, but then also that money story sometimes is so ingrained that it just keeps bubbling up, even though we're doing the work. So for somebody that's in a position where, you know, they are looking to make more money, find more streams of income, but are also having troubles, I guess, with their money story, what's something that they could start doing, I guess, maybe to figure out where their challenges are, or to help kind of move past that block?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think this is such a great point that you're bringing up, because you're right. A lot of, especially women, and I'm sure you've seen that a lot, especially women, because we're so used to being nurturers and givers and being the self-sacrificing ones in the family unit, or even just in general. And so it's very, very common that this happens. And I think where somebody can just simply start, I think bringing awareness, like when I was talking about this client that I had worked with, I think simply sitting down and saying, okay, wow, you know, I've never really sat to think and, you know, about this stuff, you know, what is my first interaction with money? You know, I think it's also very important to do a lot of introspective work and to analyze, hey, what did I learn from mom? What did I learn from dad? If both of them were present in the person's life, I think it's very important to really stop and just journal it. I love telling people journal. Just get that stuff off and write it down. There's so much power in writing this down, and just write, you know, okay, what did I learn from mom? What are the things that you heard them say often as you were growing up? Did you hear phrases like, you know, the rich don't enter the kingdom, especially if you come from a spiritual, you know, churchy background? There's a lot of stuff, and that's a whole different workshop I'm actually doing with, you know, these types of things inside the church. Some people, a lot of people, I should say, that had a spiritual background, there's a lot of different money mindset that conflicts with the version of what they learn in the scriptures. Other things like, you know, we heard this one, money doesn't grow on trees, or rich people are greedy. You know, things like that. Oh, you should just be grateful, you know, for what you have, or all those different phrases that we've heard. Oh, we can't afford that. That one is very, very common. We can't afford that. Yeah. And so think about these phrases that you either heard from mom, dad, a teacher, a mentor, something like that, anybody that you were growing up around, and then just it starts to help you see like, okay, oh my gosh, yeah, that's where I heard it all the time. And then also take a look at how are the family dynamics? Who was taking care of the money? Who was managing the money? Did both parents work? You know, did you see this relationship where mom and dad were handling and managing the money together? Or did it seem like this magical thing that was taken care of behind closed doors and you never saw? Because that's very common too, because many people, you heard this too, many people are taught, oh, you don't talk about money. You don't talk about that. And it's just the craziest thing when you think about it. It's like, if we don't talk about it, how are we going to learn about it? And then you expect us to become adults and then go out into the world and we have no idea what we're freaking doing.
Yeah.
It's like this crazy expectation that we've put on ourselves for generations and generations. And so I think it's just so important. Just sit down. Just, you know, I always believe in just baby steps. If there's this one thing you can do, sit down and journal and just start analyzing, what did I learn from mom? What did I learn from dad? And what are some of these, you know, these positive or maybe negative things that you heard around money? And I think when you start there, you will start to uncover, you can probably even start to detect, oh my gosh, this is why I hate spending money. This is why I hoard everything. Or this is why I buy everything, because I was told all my life we couldn't afford it.
Yes.
And I think that's going to be a really, really huge eye-opening experience for some people where they're just like, oh my gosh, you start unlocking these things. You'll start to discover where some of it is rooted. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's not just like, you know, you tend to follow in the same patterns. You could do the complete opposite. Like, how often do you hear people that grew up in poverty and then they, you know, get to a point in life where they, you know, they've gotten themselves out of poverty, but they spend every dime they have, you know what I mean? Versus scrimping and scraping and trying to keep it all, right? So it's not always just you do what your parents do. Sometimes you do the opposite based on what you've learned and based on what has kind of internalized for you.
You're right. It does happen that way too.
And I think finance, I think it's such an important topic, and it's important, you're right, to talk about, because I always grew up, you don't talk about money, politics, or religion. And I always joke and I say, whether you have it or you don't, it's a tough conversation. And it shouldn't be. You know, I get privacy and things like that, but you're totally right. If we don't start talking about it, we're not going to uncover these patterns. We're not going to be able to understand what our relationship with money is and how to change that if it's not serving us well. And money, like it is life, unfortunately. Like my husband always says, nothing in this world is free, you know, and it's true, right? It's always kind of affecting our lives in some way, right? Either positively or negative, but it's kind of always there. So I think it's such an important conversation to have and keep talking about, especially in business. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, a lot of our clients are that we're coaching are high achieving, successful women. And some of them are the breadwinners, or they're the primary breadwinner for their family, or they're making more income than their husband, their spouse. So what advice would you give them so that it doesn't have an effect on their relationships, you know, in their marriage? What advice would you give, something around that?
I love this question because I lived it. Well, I was married before, and I actually got divorced in 2009, and I made 3 times the amount of my ex-husband. And it was interesting because you would think that maybe only the husband would be the one affected. But for me, there was a lot of emotions for me being the woman and me being the breadwinner. So I think it's important for you guys to sit down and have an honest heart-to-heart conversation. You know, I talk about this in my book, Do Before I Do, or these questions that couples should ask each other, because there's so many things about money as couples we don't address. We think about our relationship and we think about, oh, how emotionally compatible are we? But many times we often fail to, hey, are we financially compatible? And so some of the things that, you know, when we're talking about, when it comes to, there's an imbalance in terms of the income coming in, I think it's very important to come together and be very respectful, be very open, be very vulnerable, but be very, also just listening very, very intently. And I think it's important to understand the feelings about this, like, how do you feel about, you know, the income that I make, and, you know, how does it make, you know, how do you feel about it? What are your thoughts around it? Because it's important to find out that he may feel embarrassed. He may feel inadequate, and some men may not. They may feel like, you know, I think it's great. My woman is like kicking butt, and I'm proud of that. You just don't know. But I think it's a very important conversation to have, so that we understand where the other person sits. I know for me, it was a very strange dynamic, because I've always wanted the man to lead. Because I'm already very alpha. I'm already very, you know, that kind of person. But I also wanted somebody just as strong to be with me and to lead. So I had those issues, because I felt like, oh, I don't want to feel like I'm always leading the pack. I don't want to always feel like I'm holding the fort down. I'm the woman too. And I want to feel like I'm taken care of, you know. And so those are some of my conflicts that I experienced. And so I think, you know, looking back, we didn't really have that relationship. I think there was some things hidden behind, you know, I'm going to bring this up because it's kind of happening. You know, the Will and Jada entanglement conversation at the Red. You know, I was watching a behavioral, I don't know if he was a scientist, but he studies behavioral patterns in terms of the way people, their body language, I should say. And, you know, there's oftentimes, and you saw in that conversation, they're giggling. And then I remember the guy that was studying the body language was saying that nervous laugh is hidden behind a lot of fear. It's hidden behind a lot of, I'm going to kind of like, you know, say it because I don't really feel like I can say it, but then I'm going to laugh. Of course, these are all subconscious. They're not thinking this while they're doing it. Then I'm going to laugh because it kind of hides my vulnerability. And it's like, haha, that's so funny. I didn't really mean that, but yeah, you did. And I look back in my own situation, and there were many times where my ex would say things like, oh yeah, she's my sugar mama. I mean, he loved me, but you know, we were joking, but then there was always this gut feeling in me like, haha, but not haha, you know? No. And I could always recall those feelings of, this doesn't feel good, because I you know, it wasn't even just like, oh, I don't want to feel like I'm doing all the work, but it was, I was very concerned about, do you feel that this is not making you feel like a man because you don't feel that you're contributing to the household? You know, how is that affecting you as a man? I don't want you to lose respect for yourself. So, you know, I think it's just so important, just sit down. Every situation's different, but sit down and just have a very open, honest, vulnerable conversation about how are you feeling about things? And then also discover, like, well, what can the other person do for the other person to make them feel, you know, secure and safe in the relationship, knowing that I don't need to feel threatened, and here, this is even more important, that the fact that, let's say, if it was me in my situation, that I was making more income, that I never use that as a threatening thing. Like, well, I make more money. Well, I can make all the decisions. I'm the one bringing the money. Never. We don't do that. We don't use it as a weapon. And so I think it's very important to just really, really address that we are in this relationship together. We're here to strengthen one another, but also understand, like, how can we come together so that we support one another, even though there's an imbalance in the income. It doesn't mean that defines us, but we are not going to, you know, brush it under the table and not address it, because then, you know how that works out. Things get bottled up and then it explodes later on, when we could have addressed it and been preventative versus being reactive.
Yeah. I think that's so true.
Yeah. And I think what you said was also true, is that, you know, when we rewrite our money story, even within the spouses, we tend to go back to what we're used to have seeing, right? And that if our father, for example, if our fathers were the breadwinner and they were controlling over, you know, with the money, then as a female breadwinner, we feel that maybe we start feeling that way. Oh, because I make the money, I can make the decisions. So what I know for, like, my husband and I, what we did is, we were like, you know what, it's not working like how we're doing things. We do have a joint account. We do also have separate accounts. How do we want to? So what we had to do for us was we aligned on what goals do we have? Like, what goals do we have financially for our children, for our future, for our retirement? And what is it that we want to do? So then how many vacations do we want to take a year? You know, how many, whatever it is, like, where is it that we want to go and do? That helped. Once having that conversation really, really helped us to see where we were putting our money. And we kept each other in touch, like, we're planning this trip. make sure that you're not spending that money. Maybe this is not a time to be doing this, because remember, we're planning that trip. You know what I mean? So it's kind of good to be on that same page.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's so amazing that you did that with your husband, because this is an exercise I have couples do as well, where you write this dream wish list, but I have them write it separately. So you go here and then you go here and then you write it separately. There's no judgment. You just write whatever it is, and then you put it on the fridge or whatever. And then so you're I think it's powerful to not know what the other person's writing, because like, oh, you wrote that, or you want a motorcycle? Like, we don't want to go into that. It's like,
I just bought a motorcycle. Oh my God. Oh my God. You did what?
Yes, it's just like let one another dream, because that's what's also going to strengthen the relationship. Because I think that's what happens. I was in my relationship for 10 years, and marriage is tough. You get into the cycle of life and the rut, and then when children come, and I didn't have children with him, but I know that's another added layer of responsibility that has to be taken care of, obviously. But we fall away from dating one another. We fall apart from, like, hey, are we still growing and learning about each other? And then when you have the money come in, it's another layer, right? And so it's so important to create those lists so that you guys can dream again together. So I love that you guys did that. You have the vacation, and you're right, it does keep you on check, because then it also gives you a starting point and ground of, like, okay, remember, this is what we're trying to do. We both said, you want the motorcycle. Well, I want to remodel the kitchen, but we do want to take this trip. Okay, well, where do we want to focus first? Because we can't obviously do all three right now, but we want to do it, but just not right now. So which one are we going to focus on? And so it does keep you on check, because then you have that goal in mind to aim for and shoot for. And then it helps align all the other activities that need to take place in order to reach that. So I love that you did that. It's so important to dream together so that you have something to work towards.
I found that speaking it out loud made it actually more real. It was like the universe, they say, like, everything started to fall in place, because once we were aligned and speaking to it, it's like it was happening, what we wanted to happen, what our goal was. Another thing I've seen, and I've seen this in families, is that they save a lot. They're like, we got kids' colleges, we got this and that, and then they go through their life. They don't go on vacations. They don't, but their bank accounts are amazing, right? And I'm thinking, I'd rather, like, what we did was, we didn't buy the biggest house. We didn't buy this because we wanted to travel. We wanted to have life experiences. We wanted to, we don't have, like, the lavish cars, because we're like, I don't really need a really expensive car. I work from home. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need it anymore. So it's like, does it make sense? I mean, sure, maybe, but, like, I'm just thinking, like, where do you find that balance? Because I see people are living like that and they're miserable, but they're like, we've got all this, if anything happens, we're good, but they've not really enjoyed their life either. And now they're getting older, and so I'm just like, how do you address those? What would you say to those people?
Yes, I see exactly. I've seen that many times, exactly to what you're talking about. And I think what people need to come back down to is, what are your values? What is it that you really value? And, I align more with what you said as well. I'm all about the experiences. Like, I am like that kind of person, like, I don't need to do a shopping spree. I rather go to a winery or something like that. I don't need you to buy me a new designer handbag. I want to, do a staycation or, things like that. I want the experience. Let's go somewhere fun. But those are my values. I like the life experience. I like to travel. I like to do those things and quality time. And then, for some of you who are familiar with Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, mine is time. So I think it's important for people to understand, what is your love language? What are your values? And I think that's where you can start, where you start to realize, like, okay, this is what I value. This is what I want to manifest into my life. This is where I want to focus so that I can have these things in my life, because they bring meaning and joy and purpose to me, not these superficial things. Although some people may feel like, hey, you know what? I do like these luxury items, and that's fine. I think it's important that you address and you realize where are your values and what are your money values as well. I think the other thing along with this particular sub also is the things that you value. Again, you do an exercise. Where did that come from? You know, is it that your parents impose certain things on you? Did you learn from your, you know, in your upbringing that, oh, you have to have nice things, or you always have to have a nice car? Because those are things that could have been influenced from your parents or when you grew up. And that's where those value systems are coming from. Because sometimes I think, you know, here's a perfect example, like religion. Sometimes I truly believe there are people that are in a certain religion because that's what they grew up with, but not because they really value that, not because they really believe that. They might to a certain extent, but sometimes I think as adults, I believe that you have to question sometimes, do I still believe in this? Do I still align with this? And do you know why you are doing it or following it? And if you find and discover that you still align with it, then go for it, continue. But it's when you start become a lemming and you're just doing it, you know, because you're almost like robotic and you don't really know why you're doing it, but you're just doing it. Then I think that's where people really need to stop and question, like, why am I doing this? And so going back to the values, why do you want the big house? You know, is it because, you know, my ex-mother-in-law, she was all about having the biggest house. I didn't fall under that, but you know, I did notice that I saw the pattern. All the siblings of my ex-husband, they really were all into that. Oh, we have to have the biggest house. I'm like, I don't care about the biggest house. Like, but I saw it and I saw where it came from. Yeah. That's where their value system came from when it came to the house. I'm like, I didn't grow up that way. My parents have a very modest home in an upper middle income neighborhood, and they were fine with it. They didn't feel like they had to keep upgrading and moving up and up and up. But I saw it was a complete opposite in my ex-husband's family. So I think it's important for us to understand, like, okay, that's great that you want those things, but understand, where does it come from? Does it really truly align with what you want? And is that what you feel brings you purpose and joy? Not because your mom or dad told you that that's what you're supposed to have in your life.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And sometimes it can be very conflicting. Like if you're in a relationship, you guys could have very different money mindsets and very different influences. So I always find it interesting because I know for me, like my husband and I have a joint everything. And it wasn't until, you know, all of my girlfriends, we all started getting married and buying houses and things like that we started having these conversations. And I'm like, wait, you guys have separate bank accounts? Like you transfer over them? Or I thought that was the craziest thing. And then it opened my eyes that my way is not the only way. Yes. But, you know what I mean? Like I mean, my husband is very kind of lax when it comes to, he's like, I handle all the finances. He's like, just tell me if we've got the money for this or not. Like he doesn't want to know about it. It stresses him out if he doesn't think that there's enough in the bank account for whatever we want to do. So it kind of all falls on me. But both of our paychecks go into the same account. And it was amazing when it was a few years ago when my girlfriend said, yeah, I've got to transfer over my half of the mortgage. And I thought, what? You know, it was absolutely no judgment. I just never thought about it being a different way and people having the different kind of feelings around money. So so you do the work, you do the journaling, you realize, wow, like I am influenced by this. This is not the way. It's not making me happy. I'm not able to, you know, I'm stressed about money. Where can somebody go from there? So they realize what their influences were and now they want to change. What's their next step?
Yeah. So when I'm coaching somebody, we start to identify some of the things that they want to move towards. So maybe it's feeling worthy, maybe it's feeling deserving. And then we start to look at what are some of the things that you're not doing in your life. What are some of the things that we need to start doing? You know, for example, let's go back to the client who wanted the McDonald's at 9 years old. And he just felt guilty and unworthy. And I said, okay, you know, why don't we, it actually was really interesting, this situation where he couldn't save. He just had this weird, like, back and forth situation with his money relationship. And it sounds like a girlfriend. Like I kept going back and forth, breakup, makeup. And so he just couldn't save. And I said, okay, I think we need to like slow down. So I said, let's just start saving a little bit at a time, because I know you feel that when you have it, you need to spend it. But then when you have it, you don't want to pay a bill. Like I said, you know, you have to really realize that this is really interesting what's going on here. And so he started saving, you know, for a short term, like an emergency fund, a very simple step. saving short term. And then I said, okay, now we need to create a plan, a spending plan, you know, the B word, budget. So we started creating something where now there was some structure around this. But at least he at least understood where these emotions, these subconscious patterns were coming from. He now was having a better understanding, because he said, you know, I could never do the budget before. And that's something I hear very often, where people try to do the logistic part, like the spreadsheet or the goals and things like that. But if you haven't uncovered the root or the different things that are preventing you, you're just going to keep hitting that wall. You're going to do the budget for 2 months, and then you're like, it didn't work. I give up. I keep doing it. I keep starting all over. I don't know why I keep hitting this wall. It's because you haven't identified the things in your money story. You haven't worked on that yet. And so what he ended up doing was he was able to create a plan. He started saving. And now he's amazing. He ended up moving, got a new place. I mean, he has like a lot of thousands saved up in this, savings account. It's amazing. And he was just like, I can't believe how simple, but like, I wasn't aware of so many things. So I think that's the thing that happens afterwards, where you now realize, okay, there's something, but what is it that you want to move towards? He now feels like, okay, I deserve to have a nice place. I deserve to have money set aside. It's okay if I save some money. It's okay that I want to be responsible and pay for the bills on time, even if it requires me to let go of the money. And so he's now in a much better place. So it's things like that. You just need to identify, what is the opposite that you want to move towards? What is it that we want to move towards that moves away from that I don't deserve it, or I have a lot of guilt, I have a lot of shame. We can move towards things where you are feeling worthy and deserving, and identify what are those small things that we can incorporate into your daily life that makes you move towards that.
I think that's the key to this whole conversation, because is wrapping your mind around and really digging deep and understanding what your mindset around money is. Because you're right, so many people do the logistics. I'm going to download the app, I'm going to get the spreadsheet out, I'm going to try and budget, I'm going to cut out my coffees, I'm going to cut out this. But you're going to keep repeating the same patterns if you don't identify them and then actively move towards what you want and the changes that you want to see. And I think that's where a lot of people make the mistake, is just going straight to the strategy, straight to the logistics, and trying to make those changes, which sure, maybe may help you in the short term. But if you don't identify those underlying patterns and ways of thinking, you're going to go back to the same, as in so many different areas of our life, right? We're going to default to what's familiar. Or we're going to default to what we know. So I think like that for me is really, it kind of is what I've taken away from today, is how important that money story is. To identify. And I'm so glad that you said, your client, because I identify, I'm glad you used the word interesting and not crazy, because I'm the same way. When I don't have the extra money to spend, I'm like, oh, I want this and I want this and I want this. And then I have money, or I don't know, you get a tax return or some extra money that you're not, and then I'm like, oh, I don't want to spend it now. Right. Like I have that same relationship. So I 100% connect with that on that level. And, it's really, really interesting. And I think this is such a great conversation to have, especially for women, and talking about all of those other feelings and emotions get piled on when you are in a relationship, and you are maybe perhaps the breadwinner, and how that can affect not just your finances, not just your ability to pay your bills, but it can affect your own psychology, your own emotions. It can affect your relationship. It can affect your health, right? Money and anxiety, and all of those tend to tie together. So, I've taken a lot away from our conversation already.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Jen, one of the things that you had noted that you can also speak on was financial forgiveness. So I wanted you to take just a few minutes. I know we're already at 45 minutes, but if you could take a few minutes to address that, and then if you can let the audience know, where can we get more information from you? I know you've got some offerings and a book or something that you can offer for our clients, and I'd like for you to share that as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I love this topic of financial forgiveness. And I think it's something that a lot of people have not even heard of before. But when you think about it, forgiveness is something that is sometimes very hard for people to practice, regardless if it has to do with money or not, just forgiveness in itself. And because it's requiring us to be self-sacrificing in a way where we're having to learn how to let go. And so when I do talk about financial forgiveness, I'm talking about those mistakes that we've made in the past. You know, I talk a lot about the mistakes that I created that stemmed out of the divorce. You know, and I talk about this in my book, Do Before I Do. I joke around that the book should have been called Don't Do As I Did. But I talk about the mistakes in there. So I come from a place of like, I totally get it. Okay. No judgment. Like, I totally messed up all the way around. So I'm coming from a place like, I've been there. It's okay. It's going to be fine. And so especially women, we tend to put so much guilt and pressure on ourselves. We tend to have this pattern of our words, and our words are so important. We have to be very, very careful. You know, when we talk, even with our money affirmations, the words that we're saying, we have to be very careful that we're not saying, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that again? Or like, I can't believe I let him do that. You know, they say somebody's in a relationship. I can't believe I let him buy that. I was so dumb. Or why did I give him the money? There's all this heavy pressure of these words that we're bombarding ourselves with. You're engraving that into your mindset. And that's what we have to be very, very careful of. So when we talk about financial forgiveness, I'm talking about letting that go. Letting that go that, okay, I made that mistake. I'm not going to forget it, but I'm not going to let it define who I am, define what I'm going to do. I learned the lesson from that. You know, I was even studying yesterday. I learned this prayer. It's a Hawaiian ancient teaching, a Ho'oponopono prayer about saying, you know, thank you. I love you. You guys know about this. And, you know, just thank you for the experience. Thank you for whoever hurt me. Thank you for the what I learned from that. Okay, I'm going to move on. I love you. Let me leave it there. But I think it's so important that we have to practice that, because if we don't, like, think about it. You make a fist. You're hanging on to so many of the guilt, so much of the unforgiveness, so much of the pain. And if you don't let that go, you're not allowing blessings. You're not allowing things that you really want to manifest into your life to come in, because you're too busy hanging on to the past. The past does not define you. And so we need to have financial forgiveness. We all mess up. I published it, okay? So that's even worse, okay? So we all mess up. So you have to be loving towards yourself. I say this to so many people, like, be your own best friend. Because if you had a friend, imagine you had your best friend, you're sitting down and she's telling you, like, I can't believe I did this. I spent this money and now I'm in debt again and I did this. You would not, okay, let's assume you have a good relationship. I would not tell her, like, oh my gosh, you are so stupid. I can't believe you did that. We would never do that to our best friend. Yeah. But here's the crazy thing. Why do we do it to ourselves? And so it's so important to have that financial forgiveness. It's so important for us to be our own best friend, because that's the only way we're going to be able to let go of that negative energy. We don't want to bring that here. We want to just learn the lesson and then not forget the lesson, but then move forward in positivity with positive money affirmations, knowing that you are deserving of it, that you do not have to hang on to that guilt, and that you are choosing to move forward, making better financial decisions. And so I think that's what's so important in a component of trying to do better moving forward, that you move forward knowing that this is fixable. This is fixable within time. I can choose, I can learn to make better choices. I will improve my financial situation, instead of constantly bombarding yourself with all this guilt and shame, because it's not serving you any longer.
Yeah. That's so good. And I just noticed a comment that said, you know, a money journal, that it's so needed, but it's so scary. And I think that's part of it, is we have so much maybe guilt or shame or negative feelings around our past actions. We don't even want to face it.
We don't want to face it.
We don't even want to admit to it. Or, you know, have you ever just like not wanted to check your bank balance because you're just like, I don't even want to know, right? Like, you're just like, please make it go through. Like, we've all been there. I've been there. I remember like hoping my rent when I was in university. You're just like instead of just being responsible and checking to make sure enough money was in the account, I was just like, please, like. But I feel like that it continues from when you're a young adult and learning, but it continues into adulthood. And, you know, there's a few comments being like, it's scary. Like, we don't want to face it. But I think by doing that, we just make things worse, and we just perpetuate that that story and the cycle. Whereas, you know, by letting it go, and I think it's scary because if we've made a mistake, if we have made the wrong decision, we know we're going to beat ourselves up about it, or we know we can only blame ourselves. But instead of blaming, playing the, you know, what did I learn game and saying, okay, how can I prevent this from happening again? What did I learn to move forward? How can I better prepare for the next time, versus just sitting in that shame and in that guilt?
Yeah, that, and how to deal with surprises happen, cars break down, you know, surprise, you know, payment, you have to pay taxes this year and you didn't realize it. People are dealing with that, you know, how to speak to yourself when things like that happen.
Mm-hmm. And now it's a perfect time, right? So many people have either lost their jobs, have gotten their hours cut back, you know, and it's a trying time for a lot of people when it comes not just to, I mean, don't even get me started on all the other pressures that are on us, but financial pressure. My family owns a business and they still had to pay their rent, you know, even though they weren't open. Like, there's all these things, and yes, there's support out there, but not everybody gets the same amount, and sometimes it's not enough. So I think, you know, it's such a timely conversation as well.
Yes. I think I think this is where also, you know, we did a lot of talking about the subconscious stuff and the emotions and the feelings, and to talk to your point about how do I handle these emergencies and things like that. That's where the logistics comes in. Mm-hmm. This is where the planning comes in. This is when we bring in the spreadsheet. This is how we prepare, so that you need both. You need one and the other together, because when you do the emotional deep work, but then you also have the spreadsheet and the planning and you know, budgeting and allocating money for different things like taxes, for, you know, emergency when we don't have like really good months in our business. Where do I siphon that money from? You know, and separating the accounts, like that's where the careful planning takes place. But when you have both together, that's where you can give yourself that financial peace and ease, knowing like, okay, I you know, we didn't anticipate what is happening right now, but you do your best. That's the name of the game. You do your best at the time where you're at with what you have, and you just do your best. And again, then here comes the financial forgiveness again. Okay, it's not going to be perfect, but you're going to live through it. And so I think it's important to understand that, yes, it is scary, but you also, you know, also look at it in a positive light, that's your ego. That's your ego speaking to you like, no, let's go back to what's comfortable. No, let's go back to what we're used to. Your ego is fighting. No, let's make a reason why we are the victim in the situation. So this is a moment where we need to decide, like, I'm going to show my ego that, no, I deserve this. I can do this. Yes, it's scary. You know, it reminds me of, you know, people when they have a health situation, they don't want to go to the doctor. And this happened to my mom's friend. She passed away about 1.5 years ago. The mom did not want to go to the doctor and kind of knew something was wrong. But by the time she finally went, she was already stage 4 cancer. And she passed away several months afterwards. But it's one of those things like, yeah, it's scary. We don't want to face it. But then think about it this way. Would you rather deal with a little anthill now versus a giant mountain later?
Yeah.
You don't want to you don't want it to escalate. Well, you can do more with less resources now if you want to, you know, pull the Band-Aid off real quick and address the issue and get the help that you need and start the journey now, versus like, oh, you don't want to be in that space of like, oh, I should have done this last year. You know, think about how many times people, you know, our clients are like, oh, I knew I should have signed up last year. I should have done this when you launched or whatever. The same kind of idea. It's like, look at it in a positive. Yeah, it's scary, but you know what? How are you going to feel? Visualize that. How are you going to feel when you take the step, when you take the action to move forward and go like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I need to do better. I deserve this. Let me do something about it now while I can, and it's more manageable than later on.
For sure.
So how do we sign up, Jen? Tell us.
Yes, so I would love to gift you guys. I have the first 3 chapters of the book, Do Before I Do. I love the first 3 chapters because it really was about journaling and how to really get in tune with yourself. It's not even the logistics. It's more of that journaling and understanding where you're coming from and building awareness. So that's part of it. I also have a list of money affirmations, and I kind of briefly explain like how can you use those to set you on the journey of like, okay, especially when you wake up in the morning, like why is that so powerful? And then also, I'd love to invite you for a 30-minute free consult. So if you have any questions, if there's anything I could answer for you that came up during this conversation, please feel free to reach out to me. I will give the link as well. And so I would love to give that to you guys, connect with you. And then also, if you want to reach me, my handle's there. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram at Jen Money Coach or jenmoneycoach.com.
Yeah, and for those of you who haven't subscribed already, if you go and subscribe to goalsetcoach.com and register for the 5-day masterclass, you get into our mailing list, and we'll send you all the links so you can directly communicate with Jen, get her first 3 chapters of her book, and sign up for that 30-minute consultation, free consultation, which you definitely want to take advantage of. I know I'm going to.
Absolutely.
There's some questions that I have. Thank you so much, Jen. We really enjoyed having you today. I mean, we went past the time that we thought we were, because it is just something that, this is fun. It's something that we need to talk about, and you really do bring, fun, lightheartedness around it. And I see that you really, really stand for people having peace of mind around their money story and creating the financial success that they want for their lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. So amazing, and just what a wonderful opportunity to spend this time with you all and to just pour into the community. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on again.
I would love to be back. Yes,
Yeah.
let me know.
Thanks so much.
Thank
All right,
you.
everyone. That's it for today for Rewriting Your Money Story. Again, you can check out Jen at Instagram and Facebook at Jen Money Coach, right? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
At Jen Money Coach. And you can also check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Goal Set Coach. And don't forget to sign up and subscribe and register for our 5-day masterclass. Gets you on our mailing list, and we will send out the link so you can get all the free goodies that Jen has to offer. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.